Yes, welcome in everybody. A relatively quiet week in the NFL, but we're here nonetheless to talk about everything that has gone down as we get ever closer to the NFL draft. This is, of course, the Full 10 Yards NFL podcast. Yeah, we've been away for a couple of weeks. We had a mock draft. I had a week off. So the regular huddle, though, back together on this Wednesday evening for your listening pleasure. So welcome the boys in first and foremost. Tim, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, very well. Yeah, very well indeed. Yeah, like I say, quite weak, but still a few things that we can talk about in the lead up to the draft.
Absolutely, buddy. And Steve, welcome you in as well, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, good, mate. Yeah, in our official weekly Zach Ertz tracker, he is still an Eagle, so not crying yet. But yeah, good. Yeah, like Sim says, there's not much going on. It's that anticipation for the draft, isn't it? It's only 2 weeks away tomorrow, so everyone's getting ready and everything's going a bit quiet. The calm before the storm.
Indeed, mate. Indeed. There has been a few things happening, though, and obviously one thing that happened a couple of weeks ago, and as I say, we didn't obviously podcast last week because the lads did a brilliant family mock draft. Go and check that out if you haven't done so already. But one of the transactions that obviously caught a bit of attention last week, Sam Darnold, the writing was pretty much on the wall, wasn't it? As soon as the Jets had secured one of the higher picks in the draft, that they were likely to move on from him. And indeed, that has happened. Sam Darnold traded to the Carolina Panthers. In my opinion, relatively good deal for probably all concerned. I think, like I say, the Jets wanting to move on. Good opportunity for Darnold, whether he gets the job or whether there is a genuine quarterback battle there. I'll get your boys' view on that shortly. But obviously worthwhile remembering Sam Darnold's still very young. Tim, your thoughts on it? Sam Darnold, simple question. Worth it for the Panthers?
Yeah, I think so. You mentioned they're still quite young. I mean, it blows my mind that he's actually younger than Joe Burrow. Obviously, he just spent, was it 3 years at USC, redshirted the first year, I think it was, and had one good season and kind of gone into off the back of that. And how many times have we seen kind of quarterbacks come into the NFL off of one good season? And then kind of it blows up in their face. But yeah, I mean, second round and the fourth round in 2022 and the sixth round is probably more than what the Jets were expecting to get. And like you mentioned about, the writing was on the wall. I think the writing was on the wall once Robert Saleh was appointed, and it's always hard for the quarterback currently on the team when a new regime comes in. So yeah, I'm glad for Darnold. I'm a person that's been defending him every year for the last couple of years, and unfortunately, I'm running out of excuses, especially when one of your best performances was it last year was when you had come back off of mono and you beat the Cowboys, but the Cowboys defense isn't anything to beat up, is it? So it's like kicking a puppy dog. But yeah, I think it'll work. I hope it works out for him. Obviously he's had Adam Gase, he had Todd Bowles, he's had a porous offensive lines, which is conducive to creating turnovers, which is what he likes. He did it at USC. But he'll do a lot of short stuff at Carolina. DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, he's had more. I saw a stat that he's had more receptions than like Julio, Devontae Adams, and all the rest of them since he came into the league in 2017. But yeah, I think it will fit quite well for Sam Darnold. They'll do a lot of quick stuff out, to get the ball out quickly, and I hope it will works out for them. Obviously, he gets to meet up with his old frying pan Robbie Anderson as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, he does. Yeah, I forgot about Robbie Anderson going on that route last off season as well. And Steve, just your view, and I mean, for me, like I say, it's easy to forget that a few years ago, Sam Darnold was being very much talked about as someone in the conversation for the number one pick in that particular draft. We know that there's obviously a tendency for these quarterbacks to be overdrafted. Obviously, everybody wants to try and get the position nailed, but Sam Darnold came out of that class that included Mayfield, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, and obviously Lamar Jackson, all five of those going in the first round. There's a lot of talk we could get five quarterbacks going, well, certainly in the first round. I mean, some mock drafts I've seen have got five going in the top 10 picks this year, let alone the first round. So quarterbacks often get reached for. But, Sam Darnold's surely got some talent here, mate, for the Panthers to try and work with and see what they can get out of him.
Yeah, I like the trade. I think any situation where you can get a starting caliber quarterback and not give up a first round pick is huge. Like Tim mentioned, they're giving up a sixth this year and then a second and a fourth next year. To not have to give up any of your first rounders to get him, considering he was a first overall pick not that long ago himself, I think is massive for Carolina. It'll be really interesting to see how Matt Rule works him into that offense. I think he's going to plug straight in and be there like they want him to be the starter for the next decade. And like Tim said, he's only 23. It's incredible that he's very, very young. I think he turns 24 later this year, and to be able to then have him as, you know, some rookies come out of college almost that age. So he's had 3 years experience in the NFL already, and to bring that to Carolina, I think is a huge get for them, and especially they don't have to give up that first rounder this year and in that high number 10 pick. And like you said, there's potentially, you know, 4, maybe even 5 quarterbacks might gone by the time Carolina come round at number 8. So they could have their pick of the non-quarterback draft class. You know, there might be one wide receiver gone, or maybe Kyle Pitts, the tight end from Miami, might have gone as well. But they, you know, if they want to pick up an offensive lineman to protect him, you know, like a Penny Sewell or a Shaun Slater, they could quite easily take one of those guys and plug them straight in. And almost that's an off season where you've got a starting caliber quarterback and a starting caliber offensive lineman to plug straight in and get that Carolina offense moving. What is a bit of a disappointment for Darnold is that the Panthers have just lost Curtis Samuel, and their wide receiving options have sort of been depleted a little bit. They've obviously still got Robbie Anderson, who's a great threat downfield, but they've got to stock up that, you think, that receiving room for Darnold. You know, he can't face another Jet scenario where he's brought into the camp with no options and no protection, and then everyone wonders why he doesn't succeed in 3 years' time. So yeah, I'm sure they've got plans to add some weapons offensively, but yeah, I'm pleased for him, and I'm glad that he's got out of New York, because I just think it was never going to work for him.
I think it's quite interesting to think about it in the grand scheme of things. You have to think that Carolina must have made a call to Miami when they were the number 3 pick, or at least to Atlanta. And you know, they like David Tepper, the owner, or the GM, or whatever he is. I can't remember if he's the owner, isn't he, Tepper? They must have made a call, and like I say, they do like to push their chips in a little bit, and David Tepper's a bit of a gambler and what have you. But I'd be surprised. Would have loved to have seen the conversations maybe they had with Miami or Atlanta to see what they were required to stump up to move up to go, you know, get quarterback. And then, because I know that obviously there was whispers that they were in for Deshaun Watson until all the massaging and lawsuits and all that kind of stuff came up as well. So for Darnold, it's kind of a catch-22, because it's like, you're probably the bronze medal, but again, he's not going to be complaining, because at least he gets a chance when you've got people like Josh Rosen, who came from the same class, who's not getting any chances whatsoever. But yes, it's an interesting kind of scenario that's been kind of cooked up here, but yeah, hopefully it works out for all parties.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is, it's, as you said, Steve, it's where Carolina are in the draft. It allows it to sort of now fall to them. You know, they would have had to have been ultra aggressive to move up. We've seen what it's cost San Francisco to move up, admittedly from further back. But they've given up an awful lot of draft capital to get up to number 3. And who knows, by the time 8 rolls around, like you say, what quarterbacks might be left there. You know, there could still potentially be some trades. We'll get to that a little bit later on. With potentially some quarterback needy teams really wanting to get in on the action. For me, for what they've given up, I would much rather give up what they've given up on, a still young quarterback that's got obvious talent in terms of natural ability. Let's see him in a scenario where he's got some better weapons. He's certainly going to have some better weapons than he's had, certainly recently in New York. Last year the skill players outside of Jamison Crowder were non-existent, weren't they? So, Jamison Crowder's your premier offensive weapon. He tells you all the problems that the Jets have got. So he certainly landed in a better situation, and fingers crossed for him that it goes well. Will be an interesting battle if they do indeed let the two of them battle it out, because obviously Teddy Bridgewater probably destined for a career of bouncing around as backup by the look of it, from the way it's gone for him, but always seems to do a reasonable job behind centre. There's certainly worse options out there, so I think there will be a decent level of competition for the starting job. We'll see how it goes. A man that won't be starting anytime soon is Julian Edelman. The Patriots wide receiver has called it a day. Came up yesterday, he'd failed a physical, and then the rumours started running around that potentially he'd end up back over in Tampa Bay, rejoining Tom Brady, as that seems to be the narrative these days, anyone that's got any Brady association, people think he'll end up there. But no, later on in the evening, posted a video on socials confirming his retirement, drafted all the way back in the 7th round, number 232 overall. Had a fairly decent career, certainly for a guy that was drafted as late as he was. Certainly down the stretch of his career, became the premier receiver in the Patriots system. Obviously came up huge in the postseason on a couple of occasions. I think most people will remember him for one of the most incredible Super Bowl catches ever, to be fair. There you go, right on cue. Everyone remembers the helmet catch. That, for me, was every bit as impressive, if not more impressive.
Yeah.
So, obviously, he's going to be a big loss in terms of New England. They've obviously retooled their cupboard massively over the course of the offseason. They've brought in some wide receivers, but he's pretty much been, part of the furniture there, Steve, for quite some time now. Big impact that he's had. Firstly, how do you think it affects the Patriots? And then secondly, a lot of people talking about Edelman for the Hall of Fame. Can't see that myself personally. I can understand based on his postseason accomplishments, but ultimately the Hall of Fame generally should be judged over a career, not over a few good weeks in January every now and again. But let's get your thoughts on him, mate. Edelman's retirement.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a surprise. I thought that he might play one more. He seemed to just keep on going, extensively. But I guess it gets to a point in a career where it's how many more injuries can you take before you just hang it up. And I think he's potentially gone out probably as best he could. He gave it one more year after Brady left, realized that his body can't take it anymore as much as is just playing for New England without Tom Brady. I think he's had a pretty distinguished career. He's not lit up. You wouldn't class Edelman as like your top tier receivers. He's not in the same conversation as some of the if you're playing fantasy football and you're drafting a wide receiver, he's not the first one you take. He's probably not the second or the third either, or anywhere near that. But we talk about him because he played for that Patriots team that was so good for so long. For the three of us that have been watching for NFL for as long as we have, we've only ever known, apart from the last season, New England to be the team that they have under Brady and Belichick and to be as successful as they have with them. And it's telling that he's got 3 Super Bowl wins, including a Super Bowl MVP as well. In 2018, I think, against Atlanta, he was the MVP. And yet there's still, there's talk of, is he a Hall of Fame caliber? I'm not too sure where I sit on it. If he doesn't go in, I think you'd understand that because his career hasn't been up in lights. Like, if you look at his stats, he's only ever had 3 seasons where he's hit over 1,000 yards. 3 out of 11 seasons he's been in the NFL, and he's only had 3 1,000-yard seasons. That's not really like a top tier caliber receiver, which is what the Hall of Fame should be. It should be about the very best of the best. And if you, like you said, I don't want to diminish what he did for New England in this postseason, but when you have a few good weeks in January, 3 or 4 times in the space of 11 years, I know that sounds really sort of diminishing to him, but is that enough to get into the Hall of Fame? I'm not so sure.
I think they say there about him only having 3 seasons of 1,000 yards. He's actually played 3 full seasons as well. Injuries have dogged him quite a lot, and I think there's a suspension or 2 in there as well, with was it drugs or whatever. But and like I say, Shaun, I think his catch against Atlanta for me is better than the Tyree one. It's just amazing how that one gets caught. I went back and watched it today a couple of times. But he. Like I say, if we're letting Julian Edelman in, and I'm sorry, Kieran, we're letting Julian Edelman in the Hall of Fame, we might just let every Tom, Dick, and Harry in, because it's kind of like the Philip Rivers argument at quarterback, isn't it? I mean, what's Philip Rivers done? He's done hardly anything apart from playing on a torn ACL against New England or whoever it was in the playoffs and come up short. But you can't. They've not achieved. Yes, he won the Super Bowl MVP, but I'm sorry, but he's not good enough to go into the Hall of Fame. I don't. Come at me if you want. My Twitter handle's there. There you go. He's actually. I was looking at doing some stats on him a bit earlier, and he's actually got a perfect passer rating. 6 out of 6 passing 128 yards, and obviously the one touchdown to Philip Dorsett as well. So I think that was postseason as well.
Put him in as a QB.
Funny enough you say that. Kieran mentioned, I think mentioned it a couple of weeks ago on one of the podcasts or something. But I know it was the mock draft last week. He said stick out about quarterback. But I mean, essentially, for those that remember pre-Julian Edelman, obviously he's kind of Wes Welker 2.0, wasn't he? Yeah, it's the same mould. It's like, again, not going to put him in the same category as Hunter Renfrow, but they're all just slot guys, can catch the ball and make things happen, and I've got reliable hands. That's not Hall of Fame worthy. He's had a great career. He's got a couple of Super Bowl rings, MVP, until his grandkids. I think he wrote a book as well, didn't he, about the squirrel that could, or whatever it was. And great career, but not a Hall of Fame one.
Yeah, don't disagree, mate. Don't disagree. Like you say, good player though. Obviously, his presence will be missed in New England as they look to rebuild after a down year last year. Let's talk about a couple of things then, chaps, that have happened this week. One happened today. One happened yesterday. A couple of C's coming off the free agent available list. The Jadeveon Clowney to the Browns, which seems to have been talked about. Well, it was talked about last off-season, but it's certainly been talked about for weeks of this off-season, has finally reached a conclusion, and he has signed a one-year deal with the Cleveland Browns. And James Conner has found himself a new home as well, potentially to be the lead back for the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, two teams that in different conferences, two teams that have now got plenty of talent on their respective rosters, and two teams that potentially people will tip up to be, I don't know if dark horses is the right word, but they'll certainly be, unfamiliar names to have deep postseason runs based on, recent times. But these are two rosters that generally are trending in the right direction. Tim, let's come to you. I mean, out of the two of them there, which one do you think is going to have the bigger impact on the team? And out of the two teams, which one do you think has got the best chance of going deeper into the postseason?
I think Cleveland, and just the phrase you're looking for is the tickets are available for the band to jump on the bandwagon rather than dark horses. I think looking at the two teams, I think you probably have to give the slight edge to Cleveland. I think they're ready for a Super Bowl run. Don't want to get you too excited, Shaun. But I think again, baby steps from last year. When obviously winning a playoff game, they're coming along a little bit. I think Arizona can be still got at it on defense, and so no Patrick Peterson there now. They've got a few holes on that defense, and whilst obviously I'd take Kyler Murray over Baker, and I'm sure you'd go the opposite way on that one, but. I think as that overall team, the way they go about their business, and I would easily take Kevin Stefanski over Cliff Kingsbury. I think you probably have to give it to the Cleveland Browns, despite AFC probably being a bit top heavy with Kansas and Baltimore, and I think Cleveland.
Yeah, Steve, for you, I mean, you sort of texted me about this yesterday when it potentially was going to happen, and sort of said, "Oh, does this make the Browns a contender?" I jokingly come back and said, "Weren't they already?" So, what's your view on certainly on Clowney to the Browns first and foremost?
Well, I think one thing that perhaps has gone under the radar for most NFL fans is that Cleveland have quietly had a very, very good offseason. And they've some of the additions they've made we've already talked about a couple of weeks back. But you add that Clowney signing as as an impact 1 year guy. He's perhaps not the player that he was when Houston took him number one overall a few years back, but he's still a pass rusher that can generate pressure and has experience in the postseason, certainly with Seattle a couple of years ago. And I think if you look at the Cleveland depth chart nowadays, you look at every single one of their starters and you think, that's a quality player. And I'm sure you as a Cleveland fan don't need to tell me that it's been a while since you can say that. And the depth chart is exceptional, and I think Cleveland have slowly but surely built a really good team. And I listened to your Cleveland Browns Kieran Corner episode yesterday, and that you now have to ask the question of, are Cleveland the top team in that division? And I think that certainly could be. And I think that's where the parallels sort of come with Arizona as well, because Arizona again have got this young quarterback in Kyler Murray. He's going to be in his third year. They're on that time bomb before they have to sign him to an extension, so you can pile talent around him and pay them lots of money before you've got to pay your quarterback lots of money. But they're also in that really tough division in the NFC West of teams of LA have just added Matt Stafford, Seattle, and have got so much experience in the postseason, and then they've got a really good combination of Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll, and San Francisco have got potentially a new quarterback coming in. They've got all of those injured players coming back, and we're in the Super Bowl, not 2 years ago. So it's I think it's two parallels of two teams that are really going to make a push, and if they can make it at the top of their division, I think they could both make appearances in the respective championship games. But an injury here, a suspension there, all that sort of thing can happen and derail seasons. So yeah, I would back Cleveland to go further than Arizona, but not by much.
I'm sorry, just before we move on, is it only me that just thinks Jadeveon Clowney's just a bit of a fraud?
I mean, I'm not suggesting that he's like the number one pass rusher, but I think he adds depth to that squad, and I think as a rotational guy, bringing pressure off the edge, I think he's good at doing that. But yeah, on a 1-year deal for Cleveland, I think that's a smart signing.
He's like, as a former, I know he's always going to be tough to live up to the billing of being a number 1 overall pick, but like he's probably had one good season. He's been across the way from JJ Watt for how many seasons? He's been doing 1-year deals for the last couple of years. More. He's been doing 1 year than Tor and Dean have been doing, but. I just don't get it. Like he's a good run stuffer, but he was picked up to rush the passer and sacks and all the rest of it. I mean, he might do him well. Obviously, opposite Myles Garrett might unlock a few things, and again, the scheme might help. And it's amazing how what you can look dog crap in one team, and then the king of the whole world on another team. But I'm not a big fan of Clowney personally.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember with Clowney is don't forget when he came into the league that first year, he suffered terribly with injuries. He only actually started 2 games in his rookie season. His next 3 years, he actually registered, some decent numbers. I think off the top of my head, was it something like 20 sacks or whatever over the first sort of 3 seasons. I mean, okay, you could make the argument that they're not stellar numbers, but like you say, JJ, what was the wrecking ball on the other side in that defense? I think what he brings to Cleveland is an additional piece that, he will set the edge on one end if he brings everything back inside to where you've got the likes of Sheldon Richardson, Myles Garrett can be moved inside. I think the contract represents where Clowney is now. I think he still feels that he should be paid more, but let's not forget last year he signed a $12 million deal with the Titans. This is an $8 million deal that's got incentives attached to it. So he's lost a third of his earnings, if you like, from one season to the next, bearing in mind he could have signed at Cleveland last year. I think it's a representation of where he is. I agree. If he wants the big money, unfortunately, it's a pass rusher's game, isn't it? You don't get paid big money to be a great run defender generally. But I think it's a fabulous opportunity for him to reignite his career. He was taken to Tennessee to be the guy, and he's never been the guy. You say, he was with JJ Watt in Houston. Similarly, when he was at Seattle, he was expected to be the guy, and it never really materialised, did it? I think now he's not going to be the focal point of the defensive line. There's going to be plenty of attention given, and rightly so, to Myles Garrett. Potentially that creates some more opportunities for him. If you look at sort of other stats in terms of like the pressures that he generated and those kind of things last year, there wasn't much of a drop off. He just didn't get the sack numbers, but he was still quite effective at actually pressurising the QB. So let's wait and see what happens. I take it as we've talked mostly in that section about the Browns and Jadeveon Clowney. None of us are overly excited then, chaps, about James Conner and what he's going to do in the Cardinals' backfield.
No.
No.
Yeah, as a 1-year deal, it's not really much to shout about, but I think it gives them depth, and I think they can make a run at the NFC West for sure.
Yeah, Connor's going to basically take on the Kenyon Drake role, isn't he? Me and Tim were talking about this before we hit the record button. You'll probably find that Chase Edmonds will still look like the best back on the roster, but will look good because he'll come in for a few plays here and there while Connor takes the bulk of the work. Let's move attention then, fellas, to the draft. We'll probably get more into the draft, certainly over the course of the next couple of weeks, in terms of what it probably means and feels like and looks like for everybody, but there's probably a pivotal point at the draft at the moment, it seems. Most mock drafts have pretty much got the first 3 picks as quarterbacks, and whether that's a combination of Lawrence, Wilson, and Fields, or Lawrence, Wilson, and Mac Jones, depending on what you believe in terms of what San Francisco's intentions are at number 3. I think everyone's pretty much in agreement that the draft probably starts at pick number 4, where the Atlanta Falcons are scheduled to pick. I say scheduled because they're obviously a massive potential trade partner. Tim just flashed up a graphic there for those watching this visually in terms of teams that we feel might be in the conversation to move up. We've talked already, chaps, about the fact that this draft class seemingly is getting an awful lot of love and hype, although personally I think it's unlikely that all 5 of them will end up being good starting NFL quarterbacks. Somebody will overreach for some of these guys. So, Tim, let's start with you. You've obviously released one of your first mock drafts onto the website this week, and you had the Falcons trading this pick away. Talk us through your logic for that, mate.
Yeah, I just don't see. They've restructured Matt Ryan's contract to the Falcons, and I just can't see that they've got the patience to bring someone in and sit him for a year. I think they maybe address it next year at the quarterback position, because I think they've still got enough pieces on offense to say, okay, we can kind of still be competitive. But yeah, in my mock draft, I had Washington football team trading up and. Yeah, what was it, all the way from 19? Obviously, you have to give a lot of capital to get there. But I think with it's interesting because the San Francisco 49ers deal to move up to 3 is one of those where it's kind of like the Patrick Mahomes contract when he got a contract. It doesn't necessarily, it breaks the barriers and it breaks all, obviously there's a massive overpay, but I don't necessarily mean that sets a precedent for the Falcons. And I don't know. I don't think any of these teams are going to be coming calling and offering anything in the vicinity of those. But yeah, I mean, out of the teams that I had up on their screen, I'll stick them up again now. But Denver at 9, New England at 15, Washington 19, Chicago 20. I put Pittsburgh at 24. I thought about putting New Orleans in as well, but the Jameis Winston, the GOAT, isn't it? I think out of all those teams, if I'm Washington, if I'm the Washington football team, and I hate to beat the drum again, if you didn't win your division last season, this would be so much easier. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that. If I'm Washington, right, I've got pretty much everything but a quarterback. Why not mortgage the next 2 years? Do what the Rams did to go and get Stafford. Give the Falcons a couple of firsts, chuck in a second from next year, chuck in a third from this year and next year as well, or something ridiculously like that. Grab another wide receiver in the second round to go opposite Terry McLaurin. Like there's very little wrong with that team in Washington, and they to me are just literally a quarterback away from NFC title games, to be quite honest. And the reason I say that is because the more years that go past, obviously another year or two from this year, that defense is going to be needing paid, and you're not going to be able to pay all of them. You're going to have to get rid of them and some of them, and therefore you're going to get a few gaps. And then for me, that your window starts to then shut. And if you're going to waste it by having Taylor Heineke and Ryan Fitzpatrick, I mean, there's a reason Ryan Fitzpatrick hasn't won a playoff game. It's because he's not good enough to go and win a playoff game. He does all the highlights, he does all the good throws and all the rest of it. He's just not a quarterback that's going to get you to a title game. For me, Washington by far, I would, if I'm a Washington fan, I would be screaming, absolutely screaming at my computer or whatever out into the air, and just begging from Rivera and the guys over in Washington to trade up. But I don't want to nick any words out of Steve's mouth, but Denver obviously is the most logical because they're obviously the nearest, but I think they'll stick with Drew Lock for another year. I know John Elway is no longer the GM, but he's obviously moved up to like director of operations or whatever he is. But I got a funny feeling they'll keep him for another year and then maybe address it again next year. New England, I'm not sure. I know Cam Newton's obviously there, and they want a quarterback battle. And obviously, Jimmy G will be there in a couple of weeks, hopefully. But and then Chicago, well, we all know Andy Dalton, the end zone Ed Sheeran is the starter there, isn't he? Because he got told personally by Ryan Pace that he's the starter. So.
There you go, mate. May as well sign it in blood. Steve, your thoughts on it, mate?
So I found out today that Matt Ryan, he's 35, he's 36 next month. So he's going into his 14th season in the NFL. So he's had 13 seasons in the NFL. In those 13 seasons, he's missed 3 regular season games. 3. That's astonishing. That longevity from a quarterback is astonishing. So Atlanta's got to be confident that they've got another couple of years in him.
I think so.
The team around him might be dropping off, but in Matt Ryan himself, they've got a quarterback that at least can steady the ship for another couple of years. So they don't need to draft a quarterback just yet. I think that they hold all the cards right now because they could stay where they are and have their pick of whoever they want because the top 3 are all going to be quarterbacks. That's pretty much nailed on. So they could take Jamar Chase, they could take Kyle Pitts, they could take Penny Sewell. Any positional player that's not a quarterback they could take. I think realistically, anyone below New England, the price is going to be too high. San Francisco paid 3 firsts and a third to move from 12 to 3. How much will it cost Washington to move from 19 to 3? 4 firsts, 5, 6? Like, is that worth it? No, you don't franchise. Considering how many first round top 10 quarterbacks are now playing for different teams over the last sort of 5 years. Carson Wentz, Jared Goff, Sam Darnold just happened. All of these quarterbacks are now playing for different teams because they didn't work out. Do you want to mortgage your franchise to move up to number 4 to pick the 4th best quarterback in the draft? Obviously, draft order doesn't always represent, the order of the quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes proves that. Tom Brady proves that. It doesn't always work that way. But
Dak Prescott.
Run with me with this. If they're going to mortgage their entire franchise and trade 5 picks, 5 potential first rounders, or 4, however many it's going to cost, to get a guy that might not be the answer, might do a Sam Darnold and be average for 2 years and then just sit on the bench. Like, no, if I'm Washington, I'm not even thinking about that. I think Denver might if they want to, but I think there is more chance of Atlanta staying where they are and picking up the best of the rest, so to speak.
I will guarantee they trade back. And the thing you say there, Steve, about obviously that 4 or 5 first round picks, it's not going to be 4 or 5 first round picks, because the reason San Francisco moved up is because they get their choice of, either, in my opinion, Fields or Wilson. The demand for Lance, or the demand for Fields, whatever, or Mac Jones, who shouldn't even be in the first round. But the carrot's not as big as everyone thinks. And like I say about the trade with San Francisco, the reason they did it early and the reason they did it, and they overpaid, and I think it's well known that they overpaid to move it up 12 to 3, is because they were comfortable with either the third quarterback that would be in their pockets, and they didn't want Miami negotiating with anyone else. They phoned Miami up and said, "Look, we're going to offer you this. Don't give it to anyone else. Look, there, final offer kind of thing." I don't think the demand for 4 and the price tag for 4 is as high as everyone thinks it is. But I think it's skewed because everyone's comparing it to the number 3 pick. I think they're 2 separate instances personally, but it's a good debate to have.
Yeah, I think the problem with that logic though, Tim, and where I'm more in Steve's camp, is it's not so much the demand for the pick; it's, do Atlanta want to move back from 4 all the way back to 19? That's the problem. That's why the price would be driven up. Because if you're Atlanta, you might want to move back to 6, but the Dolphins probably aren't going to come up. You might want to move back to 7, but the Lions might not want to come up. Carolina probably unlikely now because of obviously just trading for Darnold. 9 is probably as far as they would want to go, and even that feels like a long way back. Like Steve just said there, they can have first wide receiver on their board gone. Jamar Chase, in all likelihood. They could have Penny Sewell, first offensive lineman, pretty much on most people's boards, gone. And they could have, Kyle Pitts, who, by all accounts, best tight end, forever and a day to have come out of college. If they move back all the way to 19, they will want some handsome compensation for the fact that they're giving up on one of those players now. And the reason I don't think Washington will do it is because that defense gives them a window. You've just said they'll need Payne. Well, when they need Payne, it might be more suitable for them to have the rookie quarterback deal that allows them to pay more of that defensive front. So I honestly don't think Washington are anywhere near this conversation in terms of trading up. I know we seemingly always come back to Washington on this podcast in terms of what they should do at quarterback. I think Washington will just sit tight. I think they'll pick whoever's there at 19, probably the best defensive player available. I would not be surprised at that at all. I think Washington take a flyer in the 2nd or 3rd round on a Kyle Trask or somebody like that, in the 2nd or 3rd tier of the quarterbacks. Potentially see if they can, hit a magic pick in one of those rounds, and that potentially then avoids the problem further on down the line. But for now, Atlanta certainly is the pivot point. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. Let's see what the noise is. Just one word answers, boys, because I'm conscious of the time. Does it make a difference if the 3rd quarterback off the board is Mac Jones or Justin Fields in terms of the trade up? Do Atlanta have more trade opportunities if Justin Fields is still on the board? Tim, yes or no?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
And Steve's already beat you too, mate. He said yes as well. So It'll be interesting.
I just think it's smoke and mirrors. Like, I don't think they traded all that way up to get Mac Jones, so I think they probably could have got a 7 or 8 or 9.
Do you know what? I don't disagree with you, but can someone explain to me what all this smoke and mirrors is about? Who are they trying to kid now? They don't have to kid anybody anymore. They've got that third pick. So what difference does it make?
I don't think it's smoke and mirrors for anything. I just think it's just media and people getting bored and trying to just rule up a load of crap so that people can digest it and whatever. I mean, I've already put a bet on before Justin. And by the way, has anyone seen Justin Fields' pro day today? Oh, that boy's going to throw some absolute dimes. I've already put a bet on Justin Fields to go 3rd overall, and I don't care. Obviously, it's to the 49ers, but I've put money where my mouth is. And
just quickly on that, just to sort of wrap up, that's another reason.
I wasn't cutting you off there, mate. Apologies. Go on.
Just the reason why Atlanta hold all the cards is because if it is Mac Jones, then they've got Justin Fields and Trey Lance sat at 4. Any one of the teams that are ready, they can say, right, pay the price. You know, San Francisco paid 3 first-rounders to get to 3. You've got the guy that's sat here right now. If they do it on draft night, they can say, right, we want 4. I don't think it's a legitimate option for them to go back and going back to 19. You know, go back to 19 is just too far back.
Sounds like a sandwich bet to me.
Well, we may well have a few of those in the next couple of weeks, boys, as we get closer to the draft. Right, let's see if the smoke and mirrors start disappearing and it all becomes a little bit clearer as we head towards the first round in 2 weeks' time. You've probably noticed we've got a bit more of a perk in our voices this week. Obviously, lockdown's been easing, fellas. We've returned to some sort of normality. I'm not going full normality because obviously there's still plenty of things that we can't do, but it's been nice this week. Get to see a few people that we haven't seen for a while. Get to have people round in your back garden if you're fortunate enough to do so. Obviously, plenty of things opening up. Tim, what you been up to this week, mate, that you haven't been able to do for a long time?
What have I done that I haven't been able to do for a while? Not obviously, I had a haircut, although so you've had your one. No, I trolled to the post office today to send off all our college guides. That was an error. We're all walking a kilometre with what was it, 50 college guides at 600 grams a pop. I haven't been to the gym for God knows how many years, so that was a shock to the system. No, my wife had some people around at the weekend. I've been to Monday. I've been working this week, so I've not actually been. My haircut is booked for next week, so maybe on next week's podcast I won't have as much hair as I currently do here. But I haven't fully exploited the easing of lockdown yet, so shall we say?
Get out there, mate. Enjoy yourself. Steve, what you been up to, buddy?
Well, like you, Shaun, I'm follically challenged, so I don't need to worry about a haircut. But my other half has booked a table at our local pub for Saturday at 4 p.m, so I'll be having plenty of pints on Saturday in a pub where we can. I don't think you realise you miss pints until the opportunity arises that you can't have them. And then it's like, oh, actually, I'd quite like a pint or 7.
Indeed, mate. The sheer horror on my face as I went to my local pub on Monday after work. I looked out the window, thought, right, sun's shining, let's get out in the beer garden. Walked down, and the first question I was greeted with is, have you booked a table? I've never had to book a table for the beer garden at my local pub. Thankfully, they squeezed us in, though, so I did enjoy
Did you flex that you were the host of the Full 10 Yards podcast?
Exactly, mate. As soon as I said that was it. They actually kicked some other people out to allow me in. But no, all joking aside, it was lovely to get a couple of pints of beer and Moretti out in the sunshine on Monday. And similar to you, Steve, I've got some further outings planned this weekend. Living life to the maximum, lads. Living life to the maximum. As you say, things hopefully getting better in the coming weeks. So everyone that's getting back to normality, glad you've had a good week and long may it continue. Let's hope the worst of it is behind us. Tim has just mentioned there the full 10 yards college guide and the draft guide, obviously out now in digital as well as physical copies. Just order a physical just to make Tim keep walking down the post office, ladies and gents. It's worth it, absolutely. But over 200 players scouted. Get yourself all geared up, ready for draft night. Some great work from the boys. Well worth the investment, and I've got to say the print quality looking fantastic, mate. Worth all of those 600 grams a piece. So everyone that's ordered the physical copy, thank you very much for doing so. We really appreciate it. Obviously, all the profits from it going back into the Brit Ball game. So not only getting a good product, but you're also donating the money to a good cause as well. So keep those orders coming in. We'll get the copies out to you as quickly as we can, and obviously your digital ones will be available pretty much instantly, as long as the technology does what it's supposed to do. So yeah, good work from the college boys. Plenty of other content, obviously the college podcast and all the mock drafts and all the rest of the stuff as we build up towards the draft. Us three will be back next week. Doesn't matter how much news there is, chaps. We can always find 40 minutes, 45 minutes to talk about the NFL every week, can't we? As we've proved this week. Although James Conner, we will do better to try and hype you up a little bit next week. We didn't give him much love this week, did we? But fellas, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. Remember, this is the Full 10 Yards NFL podcast, all for the game.
Thanks for listening to the Full 10 Yards podcast. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter at Full 10 Yards, or email the show full10yards@gmail.com.